How are you?
I'm fine. All right. That was a dangerous question, I know. Which film of yours, sir, during the 50s and 60s, in your opinion, suffered most because of what was left out in the editing, in the post-production?
In the editing process?
Yes.
Nothing was left out. I'll give you an example. What was the period you're speaking of?
1950s and 60s. So I'm talking about the peak of the civil rights integrationist movement.
Yeah. Well, when I was during that time, a script was sent to me, and the script was called "In the Heat of the Night." And I read it, and I thought it just absolutely wonderful as a piece of literature. And I agreed to play that part. In the script was a scene in which I, as a detective from Philadelphia who had gone south to see his mother, was on his way back to Philadelphia and was apprehended in a railway station and got involved with a murder that had taken place there while he was passing through. Okay. In that film, there was a scene between myself and a man who was a very important and influential individual in that particular southern community. In the script, I went to see him with the Rod Steiger character, who was the head of the police department in that particular town. I went to see this man because I was helping out this guy who ran the police department in the southern town. We went to this guy's house, and he was in his place where he kept his flowers and his orchids and stuff. And I asked him a question, and he looked at me and he slapped me. Well, that was written in the script when I first read it. And I said to the producers, I said, who had flown in from California to talk me into playing it. I said to him, I said, I can't play it. And they wanted to know why. I said, well, if you ask me to play it, then you're also asking me to stand there and let this man slap me. And I look at him, as the script said, with anger, and then walked away. I said, no, I can't play that. I said, if my father ever heard of me doing something like that, he would have my head. Because that was the writer's way of not touching on to the delicate question of racism in the South. I said the only way I play it is if, when he slaps me because of something I said to him, that within a fraction of a second I slap him back. And they said to me, well, I don't know if we can do that. I said, well, then I can make your movie. And they sat on that in terms of a decision, and ultimately they said that they would allow me to slap this guy back. And I said, okay, you'll have to put it in writing.
Were there kissing scenes and guests was coming to dinner during the production that were left out of the film?
No, there were not, and there was none. The script was written in a fashion that there was none, and I think it was written in a fashion in which there was not, intentionally. So as to your question, I cannot say that they didn't have the guts to go through with it.
Okay.
It's simply that that's the way it came to me, and I found no objections to it. There was a shot where we kissed in the taxi that was going into San Francisco when we got off the plane.
Okay. Now, next question. What was the movie role that you were offered that you most regret not taking?
You better go over that one again.
Were you ever offered a role that you turned down that later on you wished you had taken?
Well, that is not me. Not me. It couldn't have been me. I turned down parts, and I must say, not regrettably, but I must say, there were parts that I just simply could not play. And I could not play them because there was something about the material that was offensive to my values. And it was my values by which I conducted my life.
Right.
So I could not have played in a film like I just described. I could not play something like that if it runs against myself. Because being black in America at that time, and still in some measure, still today, there was racism pretty much everywhere. And if one was committed to living in a democracy, so-called, at that time, one had to be careful with how one dealt with the larger community, because the larger community was steeped in racism and racial behavioral patterns that was offensive to many, many black people on a daily basis. Well, I first of all would never play in such movies, and I always conduct myself in a way. I look at the material and I say, in a peculiar way. I don't always say, but in a peculiar way, I say, how would my father think? What would he think if he saw me playing this? I never did that. I never, ever, ever did that, because my sense of myself comes from the values that I had accumulated from two semi-literate people, my mom and my dad. And they were semi-literate because they didn't have much of an education. Never had. And for instance, all of the wonderful words we have in complimenting people who do good things in terms of values, my folks couldn't explain those things to me because they didn't have the words. And I too was a semi-literate because I was 8, 10, 12 years old. But the way they treated each other and the way they treated their friends and even strangers was how I learned what their values were. I saw them treat each other in wonderful, humane ways. I watched them treat their neighbors that way. I watched them treat fellow workers in the tomato fields that way. So when I went to America at the age of 15, after going to Nassau and spending 4.5 years there, I knew what integrity meant, even though I didn't know what the word meant. I knew it from what I got from them and what I observed from them. So I went out into the world only with those values that I had seen expressed in relationships, their own and their neighbors, etc.